I used to believe that if something kept breaking in my life, it meant I hadn't found the right people yet. The right woman, the right friends, the right version of family. It took me most of my life to understand how wrong I was. My name is Daniel, and I'm 73 years old. I've been married twice, divorced twice, and I've spent many years quietly wondering why love seemed to slip through my hands no matter how hard I tried to hold on to it. For a long time, I told myself the story that felt easiest to live with. I said my first marriage failed because we were young and didn't know ourselves. I said the second failed because we grew apart. I said friendships faded because people change. And family distance was just how life goes. All of those things were partly true, but they were never the whole truth. When I was younger, I believed love was something that happened to you. You met the right person, the feeling arrived, and if you were lucky, it stayed. When it didn't, I assumed it meant the feeling was flawed, or the person was wrong, or timing had betrayed us. I rarely asked what part I played beyond showing up and meaning well. In my first marriage, I worked long hours and came home exhausted, proud of the life I thought I was building for us. I thought providing was the same as being present. When my wife tried to talk about feeling lonely, I heard it as criticism, not an invitation. I told myself she didn't appreciate how hard I worked. What I didn't realize was that she wasn't asking for more money or security. She was asking for me. By the time she stopped asking, I felt relieved. I mistook her silence for peace. When she finally left, I was stunned, as if it had happened suddenly, even though the distance had been growing for years. I told myself we had simply wanted different things, and for a while, that explanation was enough to let me sleep at night. The second marriage felt different at first. I promised myself I would do better, and in some ways I did. I listened more, I spoke more kindly, but underneath I carried the same habits I had never truly questioned. When conflict appeared, I withdrew. When emotions grew heavy, I became practical instead of vulnerable. I thought staying calm meant staying loving, without realizing that calm can sometimes be another form of distance. She used to say, "I feel like you're always almost here." At the time, I didn't understand what that meant. I was physically present, faithful, responsible, but I was guarding something inside myself that I didn't know how to name. I had learned early in life that being needed felt safer than being known. So I made myself useful and reliable, and I kept the deeper parts of me carefully folded away. It wasn't just marriages. Friendships followed the same pattern. I was the man people could count on, the one who helped move furniture, fixed problems, offered advice. But when conversations turned personal, when someone wanted to sit in uncertainty or pain, I often changed the subject or offered solutions too quickly. I didn't know how to simply stay. Family gatherings became polite over time. My children grew into adults, and I told myself the distance between us was natural. They had their lives, their responsibilities. I respected that. What I didn't see was how often they had learned to expect less from me emotionally, because I had trained them to. The realization didn't come in a dramatic moment. It came quietly, the way most honest truths do. I was sitting alone one evening, sorting through old letters I had kept without knowing why. Notes from my first wife, birthday cards from friends who were no longer in my life, drawings my children made when they were small. Reading them all at once, I noticed something that stopped me cold. They were all reaching toward me, Again and again, in different words, they were asking for closeness, for honesty, for something more human than I had known how to give. And again, I had answered with responsibility, logic, or silence. I had loved them, yes, but I had loved them in the only way I knew how, which turned out to be incomplete. That was the night I finally admitted something I had avoided for decades. Love was never the problem. I was. Not because I was cruel or careless, but because I was afraid. Afraid of saying the wrong thing, afraid of being overwhelmed, afraid of opening doors inside myself that I didn't know how to close again. I thought keeping parts of myself hidden was a form of strength. In truth, it was a wall. When you live long enough, patterns become harder to deny. You can blame circumstances when you're young. You can blame others when you're busy. But eventually, if you're willing to look, you start to see the common thread. I was the one constant in every broken connection, every quiet ending, every relationship that faded instead of healed. Understanding that didn't bring instant peace. In some ways, it hurt more than the stories I had told myself before. There were apologies I could no longer give in person. There were moments I wished I could step back into and handle differently. Time, once spent, does not return, but something else happened too. The shame I expected never fully arrived. What came instead was a kind of sadness mixed with clarity. I saw that I had done the best I could with the tools I had at the time. I just hadn't known there were better ones available. At 73, I am still learning how to stay present in conversations that make me uncomfortable. I am still practicing listening without fixing. I am still learning that love isn't proven by endurance alone, but by openness. I speak more honestly with my children now, even when it feels awkward or late. I tell friends when I miss them instead of assuming they already know. If you're listening to this and you recognize yourself somewhere in my story, I want to tell you something gently. You don't have to wait until your hair turns gray to ask what patterns you're repeating. You don't have to lose people to learn how to hold them better. Love doesn't ask for perfection, but it does ask for presence. And presence is something you can practice at any age. I can't rewrite my past, but I can finally see it clearly. And in that clarity, there is still room for connection, still room for repair, still room to love more honestly than I did before. If there's one thing I hope you take from my life, it's this. When love feels difficult, don't ask first what's wrong with others. Ask what parts of yourself you might be keeping safely out of reach. Sometimes the distance we feel isn't because love failed us, but because we never fully stepped into it.